Good morning, everyone. We're here waiting for Jim Drain. We're going to start a little live chat with Jim at 11 o'clock this morning. I just wanted to get on here so that everyone can start hopping on here before Jim and I start talking, and we can loop him in while we wait. Hi, Jim. I see you on there. Good morning, everyone who's jumping on. We're just waiting for Jim. Hey, there he is. I'm really living out all my Oprah dreams on the Instagram Live lately. How you doing?
Thanks for doing this. It was really fun to get ready for this and think about something that wasn't COVID related.
Look at, we're both wearing our big boy shirts this morning too.
I know, I had to look nice.
Mine is a Jim Drain pattern, which
Oh, I love it.
I try to
Yeah.
be exclusively Jim whenever we do any activities together. That's the goal. So we'll just kind of let people join in here for a little bit, because I think it's not quite 11. Do you have a clock anywhere close to you?
Um, I'll ask them. They don't look like they have to either.
And you can hear me okay. I'm testing out the earbuds today instead of just the regular
Yeah,
sound.
yeah,
Okay.
you sound great.
All right. Awesome. Cool. Well, all right, let's get started. I think if it's not 11, it's just about. So for everyone that's joining in now, this is Jim Drain. Jim is joining us from Rhode Island, quarantine with me. I'm Nina Johnson, and I'm here in Miami from my house today instead of the gallery. And I wanted to get Jim on here because just before all of this started, Jim opened an exhibition at the DeRosa. And we had planned around this time to be sharing images and press and all of that good stuff with our audience. And unfortunately, the show was only open to the public for a short time. It's still technically installed at the museum, but obviously, it's kind of a bummer to have such a beautiful show that's up and on view and not able to share it with everyone. And I know,
Yeah.
Jim, that you've also been working and kind of figuring things out from home. So I wanted to just get you on here and talk about your work. I've been thinking a lot about Jim's solo exhibition at the gallery, which was it'll be 2 years in December, I think. And
Yeah, exactly.
and your show was titled Peaceable Kingdom. Well, it wasn't titled Peaceful Kingdom, but that's the piece I've been thinking about. It was titled Zap Dingbats.
Zap Wingdings.
Zap
Yeah.
Wingdings. But basically, we opened that show kind of in the wake of Trump's election, and it dealt a lot with finding a creative utopia and the drive to make creative work in what felt like a disastrous environment. So it's obviously been at the forefront of my mind these past couple of months. So I think, Jim, maybe you could just start by telling us where you are, what you're doing, what's keeping you busy these days.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It Going back and thinking about the opening of the DeRosa, it's it feels like a different world at this point. A lot of the furniture was made. The title of the show is Membrane, and the space was really big, and they wanted it to be sort of adaptable for lectures to happen and for different events. So it's fun to have these sort of in place, um, instead of like you can do anything. It was sort of like there was sort of a limited design um, approach that had to sort of happen in the space. And for me, having those parameters were really fun, and they having those limitations were really helpful. And I worked with Amy Owen, the curator, and Robin Bernhard, who was the registrar, really closely, and really we would meet every week and show different designs, and that way it felt really collaborative. But I also, here on the Providence side, was entirely collaborative. I had 4 people that were working on all the chairs. We wrote down just to make sure that everyone would be credited, and so everyone can see their handles too on Instagram.
Well, we can see
I worked
it,
with
but
Sophia and Muffy.
the only
What's
problem, Jim, is it's reversed. So
Oh, weird. Okay. Well, maybe I'll just use them as cues for on the post for my own Instagram. I put everyone's names, and so everyone's tagged on the my last post. But the point is it felt on every side of it, on the exhibition side and the making side, it really felt like a community kind of spirit behind the work. And then the opening was so fun. The show itself had 9 of these chairs that we, like these aluminum chairs that we repurposed with this specific kind of core that's really durable and had so many different colors. And as soon as we hit our stride, it just everything sort of came together and made sense. Sort of the premise of the show is to look at, really sort of honor the history of the Bay Area arts and crafts. If you think about crafts in the 60s and 70s in San Francisco, strong and influential on my work they've been, I sort of wanted to honor that in this work. So I looked at Alexander Jacopetti Hart and Barbara Shawcroft and Josh Fott as a current artist in San Francisco working. And they each really invested time and care into crochet and embroidery and weaving. And for this, I really wanted to approach the design work from that handicraft and craft sort of centered place, which is not too far from where my work is necessarily.
None of this is, and I think one of the things that would be helpful is, why don't you give a little bit of background to everyone about what the DeRosa is and where they are, and for people who might be joining us on here that don't have a lot of information about the context of the show.
A little, but I think just giving a context for the show, that's what you're saying, Nina?
Is it still cutting out, or is that a little bit better there?
I think that's better. Yeah.
Okay.
You were saying, give a context for the show.
Yeah, just tell everyone a little bit about what the DeRosa is.
Right, exactly. So the DeRosa was started, the person behind it was, I can't remember his first name, but of course his last name is DeRosa, and he was really looking at work within San Francisco and is a big supporter of the arts in San Francisco and collecting anyone from Bruce Nauman, I'm so terrible with names, but just, Vila Fry, and really doing this wide swath of collecting. And in the end, the work that he did collect hasn't really become sort of, it's been marginalized for so long, I think, because it was sort of in this sort of craft world. Mm-hmm. And it's only till recently that people are like, oh my God, the collection has such amazing work, and it's so comprehensive in a way and really captures the spirit of the Bay Area. And all this is housed in Napa, California, which, usually people go for, a wine tasting experience and not for art necessarily. But when you go there, the whole, there are grapevines when you enter into onto the property, and then the entire building is sort of dedicated to different sections of his work, and the curators there have been really focused on sort of bringing out a lot of the collection and sort of working with museums and spaces outside of the collection to really show how amazing the work is. So there's a David Ireland piece in the back that is this angel swinging around, and it's like it really stops you in your tracks. And then you can continue on up the hillside, and there are many different outdoor sculptures too that sort of dot the landscape. And it's the feeling of like this person lived with art and loved art, and was a champion for an artist if they were famous or not famous, or if they made one work that was amazing, or there are all these William Wiley pieces that are everywhere. And it just is like, it feels alive when you're there, and it was fun to work in that space, in that context of the space.
So you basically go out there and you decide, taking the parameters of the space. And I know that you tend to work well with parameters because you have such a kind of such a broad reach with your work and the way you think about space and material, that I know, at least when we've worked together, it's helpful to narrow a particular focus or a particular set of problems that you can address, which is really looking at art almost from a design context, which I know is something that you're interested in as well. This idea of not just craft, but kind of taking design and functional thinking out of this almost marginalized place and bringing it into the same kind of high art sculpture realm. So you go out there, you're thinking of this context, you're thinking about how can you activate the space, allow it to be multifunctional during the run of the show, and you land on producing not only a site-specific installation, but also on producing this series of chairs. And so I'm going to start pulling up images of the chairs, and I think it's a good segue to talk about, this is just one of my favorites. So you were saying these are all woven out of what material?
For this one, Tara brought in some of the white is just some cord that she found, but mostly it's this paracord, which it was fun to discover this material that I didn't really know about, and it has its own history. Oftentimes it's like used for it's parachute cord is the actual name, so it was made to be very durable and very visible, but often it's used for for climbing and making handles of knives. Mm-hmm. So it exists in this very kind of a masculine world of craft, and having all these different divisions, it was fun to sort of take this something that had its sort of like own unique niche within the craft world and bring it to these chairs.
And so you collaborated with people on these pieces. How did you determine the pattern, the fringe, the palette? Was it really dictated in part by the material and kind of the constraints of the material, or by your collaborators and their capabilities?
The collaborators brought so much. I think this is a good example of that. We were learning on the fly too. So in the beginning, I just bought a stack of macrame magazines of like how to repurpose chairs, lounging chairs and folding chairs. And so we've worked with sort of a set number of different patterns we could weave into the chairs. But then for that last one, Tara was like, do you mind if I just add this fringe on the side and the pillow? And I was like, yes, that looks amazing.
We don't ever mind fringe. We would never say no to more fringe.
That's basically, you could quote me on that. And then even for, wrapping the metal legs, we were sort of wanting to really just take over the entire chair. And Tara really found a way to do that really effectively with, um, and it wasn't easy. Like this is like really time consuming work. And so the way everyone really was invested in making this possible was, I would come back and Tara would have something, or Muffy, or Sophia, and or Dominic, and I just was just amazed at how everyone was like so invested in making this show happen. So that those fringe tassels were, Tara was like, "Do you mind if I make these fringe tassels?" And I was, "Yes, go for it, of course." And it was really fun that way, where we were just like throwing different ideas back and forth. And there were a few chairs that were passed between people, and so it was kind of like it just felt like a shared kind of communal making in a way.
So how many chairs total are in the space installed in the exhibition?
There were 9, and I was really, it's a huge space, and I was worried that it wasn't going to be enough. And having the show open and having people sitting in the chairs was like such a relief, and it was just like the perfect amount for the space.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in the 10th chair that we got like 90% finished with it. Sophia and Muffy were working on it, and then I just wanted to add just a little bit more, so it's still here in Providence, which is good and bad. I guess it's fun to have it here, but I still want to add more in the next few months to it.
So this is not, it's clearly not implied function. The idea with this exhibition was that people would be able to activate the space, use the chairs, sit in them. I want to just continue sort of scrolling through some of these because the details are so playful and wonderful. But then I want to talk a little bit about almost like a nostalgic element that has come across in your last couple of bodies of work. It certainly was present in our show, and this idea of, you borrowed the quote from Junot Diaz, but the utopia muscle. And I think when I'm looking at these pieces, there's not only in the aesthetics of the finished works, but in the collaborative process, there is this kind of 70s communal, head out with your teammates and make something magical happen that comes across. And I think right now, there's such a desire for that. It's exactly what doing these chats is about. It's kind of inviting people into our worlds to connect with one another because we feel a loss of that. So can you talk a little bit about utopia, the utopia muscle concept in your work, and about the kind of historic references, why craft is important to you? I think it goes beyond just the desire to make something with your hands and kind of honoring these traditions, but I think it really feeds into the conceptual aspects of your practice.
Yeah, I think thinking about your show and the show that was in New York before, Natalie Card's, the one comment that I got was that the sculpture looked like roadside memorials that you would see.
I'm gonna show one of these, Jim, so you could see. This was our show.
Yeah. And that show, I was going into it really, I think for the DeRosa space, the sort of parameters provided this sort of skeleton to work from. And I think for the sculptures, I still need that skeleton and a context to work from. And for your show, was really honoring a friend who had passed away, Jim Walrod, that we were both friends with. And for me, like, I needed having sort of like that, it's sort of the feeling of like gifting a sculpture to someone, and having that person in mind as I'm making really helped sort of like guide the way forward. I feel like because I can go, like, sculpture for me can go in many different directions, and it's sort of really confusing sometimes to sort of find my place. But sort of as I'm building something, uh, it really becomes like a dedication to a person. And at the Pit in Los Angeles, it was a show dedicated to this one Russian constructivist, um, Varvara Stepanova. And I think it was just recognizing like, yeah, just sort of like that need that I needed, that's part of my making of like needing to make something for in honor of someone. And I feel like that sort of brings, maybe there's a sense of nostalgia in that too. I'm not making a portrait of this person, but it's sort of like, I see it in my daughter, like when we walk around, she'll like gather things and just sort of like make a pile of sticks and flowers and then just walk away. I feel like that impulse is sort of like similar in my making of sculpture. It's just sort of like, oh, there are these elements together that sort of make this moment that are sort of like captured together in this one brief sort of structure. And then it's the feeling like, oh, it could just sort of like disassemble and it's part of like in some ways, like a ritual object, so.
We've talked a lot, you and I, about being stuffed people, like people who have attachments to things and the importance of that, despite a sort of generational shift or desire to detach from objects. I think that,
Yeah.
There's this sense, like, definitely you talked about it when you and Kate first had the baby, that even babies, they need that blanket, they need that stuffed animal. It's sort of, you're grounded to our history as a person by the objects that you carry with you or you produce. And I think one of the things that's so touching about these chairs, and that you've been able to translate across your practice, whether it's an installation or it's an autonomous object or it's a functional object like this, is that they do feel, I know you said they're not specifically portraits of people, but they do feel like characters, that like this piece has a distinctly different personality than this one. And, this is clearly someone or something. I mean, that clearly has those elements. So were you thinking, I know you mentioned certain artists, West Coast, Northern California artists at the beginning of this talk. Were you thinking that with those people with these individual pieces in the same way you were thinking with your show at the Pit? Or are the personalities that came across in these works more about the collaborators that help you produce them?
I think for these, so much of the idea, like I see that in this chair, like there are a lot of ideas that Tara put into it, and it was a conversation. But I think it's different from other work. I think I'm pretty sure in the beginning I sort of outlined the premise of where this was going to go. And I think I brought up Barbara Shawcroft and like the Native Funk and Flash book, and just sort of put those as prompts for people as we were making, so that they can be informed about what the show is about too. But I think, sorry, I'm losing my place in my mind. These were different because I think it was more about the collaboration of trying to find a feeling more than about like finding a dedicated, like dedicating it to a specific person necessarily.
Totally.
I guess the best way to describe it was like, with Tara, I was like, make it sort of like a cross between like David Bowie and RuPaul.
Yes.
So if anyone, those are the two people that were in this show.
I love it.
It was like, let's make it as funky as possible.
Yeah, for sure. As if your sort of grandmother's folding lawn chair went to space with Ziggy Stardust and came back to tell the tale.
Yeah. Because I feel like with these, like this, having the structure to build from, like it provides. I didn't want it to be quiet. I wanted to really take up as much space as possible,
Totally.
and it was fun to think about like different gendered takes with this too, and how a chair can have a gendered role in a way. So
Gender is
I,
something
it
that's,
just was like,
go ahead.
yeah, oh, just that, just like how a chair could be gendered.
I think
That
of
was funny.
I think of gender a lot in your work because you do employ different crafts that are often associated or kind of historically were associated with women's crafts. And I think you do it in a way where I want to show this. Jim created this incredible ceiling for our house that's in our entry foyer. And when you did it, you said you were really inspired by quilts and um, Native American quilting techniques, particularly those in South Florida. And I feel
Oh
that
yeah.
like you bring these influences into your work in such a tender and honored way. And it's one of the things that I appreciate most about your practice. Um, I think there's like a level of intimacy between you and the reference material that is so honest, and I think it's really wonderful. And I just, I'm so happy to see these pieces because I feel that they kind of, honor these traditions in a goes
Oh,
away.
that's funny.
um,
I think I think I think teaching has been really helpful to think about like we with my students we look at Sheila Hicks and talk about like where her practice started, going to South America and working with indigenous tribes and sort of traditional making, and think about the the trickiness of appropriation. And I think in the beginning, of me making, it's that really kind of absurd and ignorant kind of way of approaching something of like anything's possible. Like I have access to all this stuff, and I think since I've really come to appreciate like what craft is and what the history behind it and how people are invested in, not seeing it as sort of like this spring that you can just draw from and then take what you need and then leave. It's I feel with this show was that was really important to like really recognize the history and sort of honor the history that precedes the making of this work and doing it in a responsible way. And um, so that's it's been like a topic that we bring up in class a lot with students. So I think I was much more focused on it with this too.
yeah.
Um,
Tell us a little bit about, how do you feel? You and I kind of talked about um, that these objects would be very used at the end of this show, and now they're not. So tell us what it's like. I mean, so many people, I think, have had their lives disrupted in ways that are much more grave than you or I. But
mhm.
you sort of work toward this show for over a year. As the show opens, there's images, but you're kind of put in a limbo. And I know that a lot of what this show was about for you was seeing these objects get used. Tell us,
Yeah.
tell us what that experience is like, and tell us a little bit about what you're working on now. Like, how are you flexing this utopia muscle um, from home and teaching? I know teaching has been such a huge part of your life and a huge influence to you. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think part of it is when I left, when the show opened and I left, you sort of like have to. It's that's a really painful moment of like having to leave the show and be like, okay, well, good luck everybody, to the chairs, and just be like, I hope you I'll see you in 8 months.
Yeah.
So there was already like a separation, and um, the space is the first thing that I really loved about the space was how much light was in there. And actually, there are moments where I just like picture the chairs in that space with the light coming in, and it's like a moment of like calm for me to like think whether people are in there or not. It's just like, oh, it exists. It's there right now, and I know that, yeah, part of me like wants that to be used, but it also is like I'm so happy that we made it and that people did get to see it. Like there was a really awesome experience when we got to. I met with the docents, and everyone came, and many of the docents, had lived in San Francisco and the Bay Area for most of their lives, and so they had, a direct relationship with craft and Bay Area art, and um, this Alexander Jacopetti Hart work called Macrame Park was in Bolinas, and I referenced that talking about like how macrame was used and as a playground for children, and one of the docents spoke up and said that she had met her husband there at the macrame park, and just having that like connection was itself like felt like, oh, okay, mission accomplished. I feel so good about this show. Another awesome experience too was like having the opening happen, and because there weren't like monumental sculpture or like discrete sculpture in the space, and people could use the chairs and just sort of like sit and watch the lake and have it be more experiential was also really incredible. There was like a relief of like, okay, I get it. All it takes is just sitting in it and I understand it with my body.
Yeah.
Instead of having a mediated experience. That itself felt really new, like a new territory for me, and felt really great.
Well, you and I always talk about our kind of love affair with design, right? Like the design world and these functional objects, it is kind of a immediate disarmer. I don't know if that's actually a word, but
Yeah.
it disarms the viewer instantly because there isn't this removed experience of, kind of the art object with a capital A, even though, your sculptures, I don't think could put anybody off, but, I think the opposite. I want to show this detail of one of your works that I think is just the best thing ever. All these little faces, but certainly even when you see these objects, you feel like you want to hug them and interact with them. When this piece was up, so many people told us that they felt like they wanted to lay on it or wrap themselves in it. And I think being able to accomplish that with this show is just wonderful. So, Jim, what do the next couple of months look like for you and your family, and how are you navigating these days?
We're doing really well. It's like thinking anything thinking 6 months ahead feels like totally overwhelming. And being able to just like wake up and be like, okay, look at the weather, and having that be the determining factor of like how our day is gonna go.
Yeah,
has actually been really awesome. And the amount of resources that people are posting and the amount of connection that that's happening is really incredible. A friend of mine, Jung Il Ong in Providence, has been organizing mask making and is getting PPE to different hospitals in the New England area. And that's been amazing to watch. She has a 2.5, 3-year-old at this point. So just everyone sort of balancing and trying to think of other people in an amazing way.
Yeah.
And Tara's been making masks, and it's been my aunt in Portland's been making masks, and that's been so great to see. Um, and I think for me, like like co-parenting right now is kind of the sculpture that I'm making, and being there with my daughter and just watching her thrive right now with both of her parents. Having time with her has been really awesome, and you know, I really feel for the people in Wuhan that like had to go through this in the middle of winter. Having spring happening now has been really like a relief. And we go outside and see all the different flowers that are blooming now, and she knows what a woodpecker is. And so having time with my daughter has been really, really amazing. So
Fantastic.
I think that the time I have had, I've been drawing more, which feels really great, and it feels like medicine. And I had a drawing project in place. I'm a little bit behind and catching up, but being able to have that space, just it's been sort of like teaching and doing projects, and being able to draw feels like a different speed, and that's been feeling really good. So
fantastic.
That's where we are, I guess.
Awesome. No, I think it's really
Yeah.
important to hear, because I think everyone needs the reminder that it's okay. If you are okay and you are healthy, it's okay to also take some enjoyment from having this time with your family, or seeing the flowers in the spring, or finding a woodpecker, and just being built for self-reflection. I think is one of the great gifts that artists and creative people have right now, and the rest of us are just lucky to be able to chime into that and
Yeah.
appreciate this great work, and also frankly to have the time to look at work in such a thoughtful way. So Jim, is there anything else that you want to add? If not, I think we could see if anyone has some questions in the chat box, and let you kind of get back to life.
Well, just thanks for doing this. It was fun to think about, you know, talking about the show and really reconnect with that time and space. So thanks, Nina, for making this happen.
I'm so grateful to you for letting us into your private space. Does anyone, I know people have been posting so many wonderful things. There's some great friends on here, Lizzie, Kevin. I think I saw Benny Maris on here. Who else was on here? I think your lovely mother-in-law was on here maybe at some point. Kate is too. All the good friends. But if anyone has any questions, put them in the chat box. There's usually like a little bit of a delay, so we can wait a couple seconds to see if anything comes through. And, also if anyone wants more specific images of this show or particular works, or, anything that's happening at the DeRosa, just reach out and we'll be glad to share it. So here's one. Other than macrame, did you utilize other techniques, perhaps latch hooking?
Yeah, the main sort of seating space is all woven. And then there was latch hooking to add. Muffy and Dominic, they used latch hooking to. There's like macrame material that you can get, it just feels like fluffy plastic, and that was latch hooked into like the different woven spaces.
I'll show that one so people can see. Cool.
And then it took forever. Muffy did most of it. To fluff it up, she used a fork, and we tried different combs, and she really was dedicated to getting it as fluffy as possible.
And that's, Jim, you're talking about these parts, like the little puff balls that you see on this work?
Those are pom-poms that Tara made. The let's see, it's not a lounger. It's a just a, like a regular seat. Yeah, that one right there.
Okay. Kevin Arrow is asking, what is your connection to the history of psychedelia? These chairs and lounges are asking me to turn on, tune in, and drop out.
Hi, Kevin.
Kevin, that's a trap. That's a trap.
I think it's that. I think with psychedelics, you get connected to like a community. You get connected to like a bigger world than yourself, and maybe there's a feeling of that in these works. Hopefully, where the sense of community that and the making of these is present, and I also I can't help it, but I love neon colors, and these do really well under blacklight. And so, Kevin, I hope someday you can sit one of these, and we'll take psychedelics together.
Awesome. We have another really nice question here. Hi, Jim. Thank you both for this conversation. I'm a first-year grad student at SMFA, and I was wondering if you had any advice for students during quarantine and the limitations of that.
I've been sort of witnessing. Kate's been teaching 2 classes online lately, and I'm advising 1 student. And seeing students make work right now, it feels like heroic to be able to do that. But it's also probably, I'm guessing, really grounding for people to be able to put their minds the way that drawing has been for me. Something that Andrew Kuo, if you go on Twitter and look at Andrew Kuo's Twitter handle, like he was saying, like, don't feel the need to be productive right now. Like, yes, this is supposed to be like maybe the time that you think, someday I'll get to this, when have all the time in the world. And maybe now that you have all the time in the world, it's better just to be like present with yourself and not feel like, okay, I have to come out of quarantine and have like a whole new body of work and feel that I've made like so much progress in my, in my understanding and in my making of work. And I feel like that's pressure I think really now the time is about self-care. And if making helps with self-care, then I think that's where people should be focused.
Okay.
I think that's the most important thing right now.
For sure. We've been, our kids are at an age where they're young children trying to homeschool. And, I know a lot of parents are having difficulty with that. And I think the most kind of pertinent thing that I've seen is you have to just take care of yourself and your community the best you can and not forget, despite the fact that many of us are at home in relatively comfortable situations, that there is a global pandemic happening, and that sort of environmental and societal stress is real. And Kate is saying set boundaries for productivity, labor, and leisure space and time, which I think is wonderful. And Monica and Benny are making me blush, and I just want to say you guys are the best and so sweet. And then let's answer Lizzie's question, and then we'll let everyone go because I don't want to get cut off, and I think this cuts off at 45 minutes or an hour. But Lizzie says you come from a deeply collaborative practice going back to Force Field and Fort Thunder. Does this time inspire you to think about new kinds of collaboration with other artists?
Hi, Lizzie. That's Liz Collins, right?
Yeah.
The reality is, it's hard to think beyond like 2 hours from now. There was, you know what, actually, I do have an idea of collaborating with different artists. I don't know if I'm ready quite to like announce it necessarily, but my sister had a really good idea. She's in Maine working at LL Bean, and I feel like I'll let Lizzie know Liz, I'll let you know when that happens. But there is something that I'm thinking about of way to connect artists. And that's been fun to see happening with the mask making. Is there has been communities perking up because of that, and maybe I'll leave it at that right now. I still want to announce something that I might not be able to get to, but it is something that I'm thinking about of like how, especially like the fundraiser that Kate was showed me was for the hospital in New York. Like all these photographers came together and offered such amazing work and raised $1 million. Like that, but I think you're seeing what the potential of art is beyond just like art is like such a community builder in itself, and it's fun to not fun. It's profound to see that happening now.
Totally. I saw something here where people were asking artists to produce positive imagery that could be put up in intensive care units and isolation wards because there's nothing on the walls, and so they could bring these pieces in and put them up. And
that's cool.
You know, I think it's important to remember the sort of importance of culture and art in a time like this, you know. All right, Jim. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And I should note that
Thanks, Nina.
This stays live on our Instagram page for 24 hours, but we are archiving all of these talks on a newly set up YouTube page. So if anyone wants to share it, they can do that. And yeah, thank you. You know, stay safe.
Thanks, Nina.
And thanks for taking the time.
You as well. Okay. Say hi to Dan.
All right. Say hi to the girls for me. Hopefully we'll be in Maine soon. We're like Maine.
I know.
We're coming, Monica. We're coming. All right. Bye, guys.
Awesome. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.